Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to do some 3D drawing in Adobe Illustrator and teach you how to make an isometric drawing like this room here. So let's get started. So the first thing that we'll do is to create a new document. I'm just going to use the web most common right here and say create. And so the first thing I did was I made a grid. Now you don't have to have a grid in here. You can use Adobe Illustrator's tools to completely make your drawing, but I think it's good to know how to make a grid. And in case you want to do any of the drawing freeform in perspective, it's good to have. So to find the grid tool, it's over here behind the line segment tool. So find the line segment tool on your toolbox and go down and choose rectangular grid tool. You're just going to double click on your artboard to pull up the options. So go ahead and make this 1000 by 1000. You can leave that at 100, 100, and just say OK. And then you see it gives you this grid. Now it's not in perspective yet, so I'm going to show you how to put it in perspective. You'll need to get your properties panel open. So if that's not open, make sure you go to Window and choose properties, because we're going to do a few things to this. So first of all, you want to unlock that. So it's locked here. Make sure that you have that unlocked. So it's the lock with the slash. And you're going to change the height to a very specific number. I have it written off here to the side. Change the height to 866.02. And say OK. And then you're going to go over to the rotate and skew and put it on there. So to do that, you need to go to transform. So make sure you open the transform panel and you can make these changes. You can make the changes to the height and width there, and you can also do it here. So I'm going to shear this -30 degrees and I'm going to rotate it 30 degrees. All right, and that gives us our grid for the isometric drawing. So if you wanted to press Control 5 and Object, Lock, Control 2. Now you can't, accidentally select this. Now if you want all your lines to snap to this grid, I'm going to leave mine off, but if you want to, you can put Snap to Grid right here. All right, so like I said, you don't have to have this on here, but if you wanted to do some freeform drawing with it, you could get the pen tool and you can use the grid to draw your objects in perspective like that. So if you wanted to do, and the cool thing about the grid is if you don't line it up correctly, you can always go back, get your direct selection tool and move things back in line. So if you wanted to start drawing that way, that is an option. I'm going to show you the effects up here where it's 3D, the extrude and bevel, revolve and rotate. I'm going to draw everything with this, but I did want to show you how to make a grid in case you want to do it that way. And I am going to go ahead and save that layer and lock it. I'm going to turn it off for now. Go ahead and add a new layer, and this is where I'm going to draw my scene. So I'm going to draw something that looks like this one right here. So let's get started. So the first thing I need to do is to come over here and get the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw the floor for my room. So when I drag this rectangle, I'm going to hold the shift key and make a perfect square for this one. I didn't do that on my other one, but I have an idea for what I'm going to do at the end of this, so I want mine to be perfect square. And let's go ahead and fill it with the color. You can change this later if you want to. And now let's go ahead and put it in perspective like I have this floor here. So to do that, you just go to Effect, 3D, and choose Extrude and Bevel. And you want to go down here and pick from these isometric things. Now I want to be my floor, I'm going to put it on isometric top, and make sure you have preview checked, and you can see how it made it a floor. Now if I had it on isometric left, it makes the wall, so forth. So I'm going to do the floor first. So let's put it on isometric top, and this extrude depth is what lets you choose, how thick your floor is. So if it's on 0, it's completely flat. I want my floor to have like a little bit of depth, so somewhere around 10. And then it has these shading things, this plastic shading wireframe. I'm going to leave mine on plastic shading for most of it. It also has a bevel thing, and I'll show you how to use that when we make other parts of the room. Okay, and then just say okay for now. So then we have our floor. Now you'll see that when I click on this, it's still showing the bounding box being the square that it was before. It's okay if you want to leave it that way because it's easier to scale things when you leave it that way. But you can also go to Object, Expand Appearance, and then when I go to Control Y, the preview, you can see that it actually went ahead and made the piece of art in the shape that it's appearing. So if the good thing about that is if you want to change individual parts of it, you can select and change the colors that way. Alright, so when I turn the grid on after having my ground put in, you can see that it's lining up in the same perspective as this. So now I'm going to draw a wall that's going to go up over here on this side, and I want it to have a window on it. So I'm going to make it, you don't have to have it exactly the right size because you'll be able to change it once you make it 3D, but it's going to be about that size. And I'm going to knock a window out of it. Let me make that a different color so I can actually see it. And I'm going to center it in here. Alright, so I'm going to select both, and I want this to get knocked out of there. Let me move it over a little bit. So I can either use the shape builder tool, or I can go over here in Pathfinder and knock that out. Alright, so that way there's actually a hole in it for my window. Alright, so now I'm ready to go up to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel, and I want it to be on the isometric right. And once again, I'm going to put my extrude depth at 10. And I'm going to put it in place. Now, you'll remember when I did the floor, I did Object, Expand Appearance, so that my bounding box would match up with the actual art. But in this case, I'm not going to do that on the wall yet because I still want to be able to change the size of the wall to fit. And if you do that expand appearance thing first, then it kind of loses perspective. So let's get this thing nudged in the right place. That looks pretty good. I can turn my grid on to make sure everything is looking good, and it is. So once I get that where I want, if I'm sure I'm not going to change the position, I could just go to Object, Expand Appearance, so that my bounding box would follow, the piece of art. But there is an advantage to leaving it like this because you can also go back and change the color of it. So that's another advantage to just leaving it like that. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that for now. And I'm going to go ahead and build the wall that goes over on this side. So I'm going to build another rectangle. And let's go to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel. And this time we're going to go to isometric left. And again, my extrude depth is going to be 10. You can pick something else if you want your walls to be a little thicker. And then I'm going to move it into place and then scale it so that it's fitting in there just right. So I want to move it to the edge of the floor. And that looks pretty good right there. All right, that's pretty good. And all right, so now we have our floor, we have our walls. If I want to change the color of any of them, I can always click on that and change it to a different color. I'm going to leave it on this cyan color for now. And the floor, so when I did that expand appearance thing that I did at the beginning, and I made the bounding box match up, the bad thing about that is that you can't really change the color of it without selecting each piece separately. So the top part and each of the two sides is now a separate color swatch. So that is one disadvantage to doing it that way. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to make a flat screen TV on this wall over here. So we are going to get the color black and the rectangle tool and draw something about like this, and go over to the effect 3D extrude and bevel again. We're also going to go back to the isometric left, and we want this extrude depth to be pretty thin. I would say no more than 10. Sometimes if it's not previewing, you can turn the preview on and then turn it off and then turn it back on. I think the TV needs to be just a little bit thinner. And then I'm also going to give it a bevel. Put it on classic bevel, something like that. Say okay. Now I notice I can't really see the shape of the TV that well. So if I make it like more of a gray color, you can see that it actually has like this beveled edge to it. Alright, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and put that on the wall there. And then I also have what I want to do to put a picture inside the TV is I already copied a picture off the internet that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and paste this picture in, and I'm going to make that a lot smaller. And then once again, we're going to go to the effect 3D extrude and bevel, and we want to go to isometric. I always do the wrong one. Isometric left. We don't want any extrude depth on this though, so we're going to leave that flat. And we don't want any type of shading at all on that, and say okay. And then reduce this down so that it fits on the television screen. Alright, and if it's not exactly the right size, you can always go back and select your TV and change the size of that. Alright, and then I want to put like a little shadow on the wall, so I'm going to take the television and do a copy, paste, and let's fill that with black and go to opacity. I'm going to double click on opacity and change this normal to multiply and reduce the opacity just a bit. And then we're going to move that shadow to like this and say object, arrange, send to back, and then I'm going to send this wall to the back. Select the wall, object, arrange, send to back. And I'm going to put this one in the back too, actually. There we go. So the next thing I want to show you how to do is to make a pattern. So let's say you wanted to make like a rug in this room with a pattern or wallpaper or something like that. It's really very easy. So while the camera was off, I just did this little doodle. I made a square there, and then I used the brush tool just to squiggle some lines inside of this rectangle. So before I make it a pattern, I want to select the whole thing, and I want to convert these brush strokes. See, right now they are just a stroke and with no fill. I want to make them a fill. So I'm going to select all of them. I actually don't need the rectangle, but all of my little brush strokes, and go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke. So what that does, it actually makes it an actual line. So there's no stroke, it's actually just filled in with that color now. Alright, so I want all of these to be a pattern, so I'm going to select the whole thing and do Control G, which is group, or Object, Group right there. And then all you have to do is, if your swatches tab is open, if you go to Window, make sure swatches is open, all you have to do is take that and drag it right into your swatches, and now it becomes a pattern swatch. So if I want to fill any shape that I draw, even if it's a circle, or anything. I can fill it with this pattern. Okay, right now it's making it a stroke, but let's make it a fill. So yeah, now anything that I draw, it can be filled with that pattern. All right, if you want to edit that pattern at all, you can always go over here and double click on it, and it gives you all these options, whether you want to tile it as a grid or brick or hex. There's all these options. Size the tile to the art, move the tile with the art. I'm going to put it on size tile to art. Tells you how many copies. So there's a lot of options, and of course you can name it whatever you want to there. I'll go ahead and name mine rug. Oops, rug. All right, and then I'm going to press escape to get out of that. All right, so I have this pattern made. I can just actually delete this now, and I can make a rectangle, and let's do something like that. And I want to make it a rug, so I need to put the perspective on it. So I'm going to go to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel. I want to show you one other thing actually before I go to this 3D. You know, all you have to do to put it in perspective is to do this rotate and skew thing too. So if I were to go up to the shear, not skew, shear, and go -30 and put this on 30, it would also put it in the same perspective as the ground too. So that's another thing that you can do. But the problem with that is when you go to change the size of it, it gets it all out of whack. So we're not going to do that. Let's go back to our regular rectangle and go to 3D, Extrude and Bevel. It takes a minute to do it with the pattern in it, so it's going to be a little bit slower. And we want to go to Isometric Top. And the extrude depth will be 0 because it's just a flat rug, and say OK. All right, so now you can see that pattern that we made, it's actually put in perspective. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to make a couch. I'm going to put a couch over here against this wall. So you want to get your rectangle tool. We're just going to make like three cushions. Whoops. We're going to make like 3 cushions and join them together. So I'm going to draw the first square cushion here and go to Extrude and Bevel. We want to go to Position, Isometric Top, and we need the extrude depth to be I think somewhere around 18 looks good for that. We want to put a bevel on this and make it rounded so it looks more like a pillow. And I'm not sure what type of shading. I think diffuse shading looks better. We don't want it to look too shiny. And then we're going to say OK to that. All right, so now we have this first cushion. We need to have like 3 cushions on this couch, I think. So I'm going to hold the Option key to drag out another copy of it and put it right next to the other one, and then do the same thing. Actually it's the Alt key on Windows, it's Option on Mac. Hold the Alt key to drag another copy. So now we have the cushions. Now I'm going to hold the Shift key and I'm going to group, Control G, so that when I click on that I have the whole bottom of the couch. And as long as we're not going to change colors, you can go to Object, Expand Appearance. That way the bounding box will actually fit the couch. But the only problem with that is once I do that, I won't be able to change the color of the couch. See, right now I can still change the color of the couch. So I think I will be happy with that gray. So I'm going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. All right, and now I need to draw the back of the couch. That's going to be like more like one long cushion like this. So I'm going to go to 3D, Extrude and Bevel, Isometric right, and we want the shading to be diffuse. We want the depth to be maybe a little bit thicker than the other part was. And of course we want the bevel to be rounded again, and say OK. And let's line it up on the back of that cushion. Change the size a little bit so it goes from edge to edge. Alright, that looks pretty good, and I can go ahead, once I have it exactly the size I want it, we can go to Object, Expand Appearance. Remember, you don't always have to do Expand Appearance, it just makes it easier to select things. Like when you do Control Y, you can see that it actually draws it around the shape instead of having it just the box, what it looks like before you do the 3D effect to it. So I'm going to click on this and group them together. Now I have the couch where I can move around the room a little bit, and I need to add some legs on this couch. So I'm going to go over here and just make an ellipse, just a small one like that. We're going to make it kind of a wood color, and again we're going to go to Effect, 3D, Extrude and Bevel. This time we're going to go from the top, and the extrude, we just want short legs on our couch. So something like that will probably be fine. Zoom in a little bit and put it about here, and of course we need the couch to be on top of that. Object, Arrange, Bring to Front, and then once again hold the Alt key to make copies. Something like that. And then we're going to shift click on all those, do Object, Expand Appearance, and then click on the couch and do Control G. Now we have the couch all as one group that we can move around the room a little bit. I'm going to pull it away from the wall some and center it in front of that window. Let me move the carpet a little bit. Now I want to show you how to do something a little bit different with the 3D tool. And also, while I was off camera, I also decided to re-import my television screen. I had given you a hint earlier in the video about if you do this skewing and changing the perspective of the picture in Photoshop and then paste it in Illustrator, it won't make the picture all pixelated. So Illustrator doesn't really know how to do that effect on the photo on a bitmap image, since it's a raster image, and make it look clean after you do that. So you can do that part in Photoshop if you're trying to make a photo look clean. And then the other thing I did was I made my rug bigger so that the pattern would appear smaller in it, because before the pattern looked really big in it. So alright, so those two things I did off camera. So now let's go back to learning how to draw some different types of shapes. So you'll know in my original one that I did, I made this vase here and this vase here. So that's a little bit different technique I want to show you how to do. So basically you can get the pen tool and you only have to draw half of the vase. So what I mean by that, it's kind of good if you go over to the edge of the artboard so that you start drawing it and have endpoints that end up on a line. So let me do that to show you what I mean. I'm going to draw a dot here right on the edge of my artboard. Then I'm going to come out like this, and this can really just be any shape you want, but this is kind of how I did my vase. Something like this. Okay, so you just need half the vase, and then click on the pen tool to stop the path, and then I'm going to get the selection tool, and I have this little, let me make it a color so you can actually see it. I have this just kind of half of a vase, and what we're going to do is spin it around into, well, I'll show you. It's hard to explain. You have to actually see how it works. So what we're going to do now, we have this shape, is we're going to go up to Effect, 3D, and instead of Extrude and Bevel, we're going to go to Revolve. So when we do that, you see it takes that shape and it spins it around into a circle to make like this 3D looking vase. So once again though, we do want to go to the isometric and choose the isometric. I'm going to choose isometric left, and we can leave it on plastic shading and say OK. And then we can go and put this in our room. I'm going to make mine a little bit smaller and skinnier. And I'm also going to put just a black ellipse like on the top of that so that it looks like there is a hole. And just fill that with black. You can fill it with a gradient to make it look more realistic, but I think that's good enough for what I'm doing. And then if you want like a plant to come out of it, you can just draw that on your own. I'll just get the brush tool and get a green color. And maybe just draw one stem here. Okay, so I'm just going to give it the green stroke, and let me go back to the brush tool, and then I'm just going to make like one palm frond and then just copy and paste it. Looks kind of rough now, but it will look not as bad when I'm done. Alright, and I want to select all those little things. So I'm going to click on one and go to Select, Same, Appearance, and that's going to select everything that I just painted. And now I'm going to do Control G to group it. And then like I did when I did the pattern in the rug, I don't want this to be a stroke anymore. I want it to just be a solid object. So like what I mean by that is if I go to Control Y, you can see that this is just lines, but I want it to actually be, you know, like a filled in object. So I'm going to go to Object, Path, Outline, Stroke, and then it becomes, you know, an actual thing that's filled. So what I can do with this, once I have one of these, I can change the shape just a little bit. Once I have one of those, I can just copy and paste them to make, make my plant. I'm sure we could do something better here, but I'm just trying to be kind of quick for this part of it. Alright, so that's good enough for that. I'm going to shift click and group this. So I have my plant and I'm going to group it with my vase. And do Control G, and that way I can move it around. I can put it over here if I want. Alright, so that's how you can make a vase. So I'm not going to show you how to draw everything that I did in this picture here. I think you get the basics now. Like I drew this guitar doing the same things where I just drew the shape of the guitar and I did extrude and bevel. And so that's how I did that. Same with these shelves and this book I did. Just all using the same techniques that I've already shown you. This table I did the same way. So there's really nothing new to learn here except for maybe the shadow that I did at the bottom. I can show you how I did the shadow, but I'm not going to make a video on how to draw each object. I think you basically have enough tools under your belt now from what I've shown you to learn how to make a table and shelves and put other things in the rooms. So the last thing I'm going to show you is just how to make a shadow underneath the whole thing. Like I have this blurry shadow. I also took time to make shadows under the couch, and I made a shadow on the wall for the plant. So if you take the time to do that, I showed you how to do that with the television. If you do the same thing for your couch and your plant, it will look a lot more realistic. Alright, but the shadow that I will show you for the very bottom, let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to copy and paste my floor and go ahead and make this bigger and go Object, Arrange, Send to Back, and I'm going to use just a gray color, and then opacity. I'm going to lower the opacity of it, and then finally I'm going to go and put a filter on it. So I need to go to Effect, Blur, and choose this top blur here, and something like that. All right, that just makes it look like it's kind of floating up in the air a little bit. So before I end the video, I did want to show one other thing that I did here that would probably come in handy. So I started to put in shadows for some of my objects. It just makes it look a little bit more realistic. I think this one is pretty obvious. You know, I just drew a rectangle, and I did use the grid for that. I just free-handed it with the pen tool instead of using the object or the effects for the 3D. I just used the pen tool on that. But I did want to show you how to maybe do like the shadow on the plant. That's a little bit trickier, and it really does make it look a lot more realistic to do that. So this is a little bit complicated to do that, but let me show you how. So as far as the shadow that's going to go on the floor, that's a separate piece than the shadow that's going to go on the wall. So to do the one on the floor, that one is pretty easy. I'm just going to take the pen tool and just kind of draw this ellipse here that goes like that. And I am going to click on that and then go up to opacity, put it on multiply, and then lower the opacity so it's not super dark. And then I need to bring this plant up to the front. So go Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. So the one that's on the ground, that one's a little bit easier, but the one that's going to go on the wall, that one is trickier. So let me show you how I did that one. So first of all, what I want to do is get the pen tool and draw out where the floor and the wall meet, and draw this line like that. And then I'm just going to draw this box. As long as it encompasses the whole plant that's against the wall, that's fine. I want this line where the floor and the wall meet, and then anything that just goes up and around the whole plant. And what I'm going to do is hold the Shift key and drag, hold the Alt key too, and drag a copy of it. You can also just do Control C, you know, copy and paste another copy of it. That's fine. So what I have now is that plant, and then I have this shape here that's going to show where I'm going to cut my shadow off. I know this seems weird, but it'll make sense when I start doing it. And I can go ahead and delete that gray blob over there. And right now I'm going to hide this object, hide selection, so that I can go on to the plant. If I do Control Y, you'll see that it's still just a single line here, and I want that to be fully drawn out. So we're going to go to Object, Expand Appearance. Now I have that. If I do Control Y, you can see that it rendered out the whole shape. But I want this to be all one shape instead of all those complex shadings and everything. So if you go to Pathfinder and click on Unite, now you can see it just turned it into like an outline of the whole thing. And now I can go to Object, Show All to get my gray blob here. And what I want to do is I only want this part right here to be my shadow. I want to cut this off, and I don't need this gray blob. So I can click on both of those, get my Shape Builder tool, hold the Alt key down, and delete that gray blob and delete that bottom piece. Now I have the area that is just a shadow. So I can go over here and put it behind the vase on the wall. I can use my eyedropper to make it the same transparent or lower opacity with the blending mode, and then go Object, Arrange, Bring to Front. And you can actually lower the opacity a little bit more on the shadow that's on the wall. It would be a little bit lighter than the one that's on the floor. All right, so that's how you can do some shadows. I know that's a little bit complicated, but I thought some of you might want to know how to make a shadow of something more complicated like that. So these shadows that are under the couches and the TV, those are pretty easy, but when you get to something like that, it's a little bit trickier. So another thing I wanted to show you before I end the video is if you do a couple of these different rooms and put them together, it's really cool. You can make like a whole building full of different rooms with different decor in them, and it's pretty cool when you start stacking them together. And the other thing you can do is you can also put text with it too. So like let's say I get the text tool and I type isometric, and let me make it bigger. And then if you go to type, create outlines, and let's see, I'll make it this pink color. You can still do the extrude and bevel to it. So you can go to this and you can put it on like isometric top if you want it coming from that way, or isometric left. I'm going to leave it on top for this. Isometric top, and maybe bevel it a little bit less, something like that. Alright, so that's another cool thing that you can do with this effect here, the 3D effects that Illustrator has. You can even put gradients on them. So yeah, experiment around with it. Add some more furniture to your spaces, add different spaces together, play around with adding type